we did find a new audience of people who we may not necessarily reach if it wasn't for the Switch. Do not underestimate the physical edition. Nintendo players are very receptive or appreciative of physical editions done right.
Hello and welcome to the Game Business Show with me, Christopher Dring, your guide to what's going on in the global video game business. We've been covering the Nintendo Switch 2 quite a bit on our shows over the last month, and we're now just over a month away from the console hitting store shelves. And one of the most interesting elements about the Switch 2 is the sheer amount of third-party support it is getting from AAA game developers. We've had Final Fantasy VII Remake, Elden Ring, Borderlands 4, Project 007, Hitman, Street Fighter 6, Star Wars Outlaws. There's some really big games in there. But one game that is getting a lot of the headlines, and is one of the console launch titles actually, is CD Projekt Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk was a game that is a technically challenging title. The game very much struggled, at least at the beginning, on PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. But here it is, running on Switch 2, and I've played it, and it's doing a pretty good job. So I was very eager to chat with the developer CD Projekt about the game, why they wanted to do it, and I'm delighted to have with us today Jan Rosner, who is the VP of Business Development at the studio. Hello, Jan. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Chris. Thanks so much for having me.
Have you been on the road with the game? Have you been one of the people that's been doing the Switch World Tour?
A little bit, no, not me personally. I mean, I've only visited the Paris event, which was super cool. I also got to experience some other titles. But yes, we have been present on pretty much, I think, every show so far, which Nintendo organized, and every event where consumers can get their hands on with the game.
Yeah, I saw it in London, and I was very eager to give that one a go. Have you been paying attention to the reaction?
Oh yeah.
What have you heard? What's people been telling you?
Well, so far so good. We are really, happy with the reception so far. I'm personally seeing the sentiment, which I was quite hoping for, so that it really feels like Cyberpunk on the go. And, people who have played it, outside CDPR were, I think, quite happy with what they saw. It is also a first for us because we have never launched a game together with a console. We're very curious how it's going to go, but we remain, I think, hopeful and optimistic. So that's cool.
Yeah, I guess that puts a bit of pressure on because you've got a deadline, right? The other things you can say, we can push it back a bit, or we can work with our own timelines, but you really want to get there. And I think it is a bit of obviously the hero title was Mario Kart from Nintendo's point of view.
Yeah.
But I think from a third party point of view and an industry point of view, seeing what a game like Cyberpunk can do on that machine is I think, crucial to the platform, even if, on top of that. So that I guess there's getting a game ready for launch. It has certain challenges to it that...
It absolutely, did to some extent. Of course, we are very much aware of the timeline when the game has to be ready. Of course, we wanted to make sure that it feels and plays right, and it feels also organic to the platform. So when pretty much everything was checked, then we just decided to give it a go, and then we're very happy that it's actually going to ship put together with a console.
Certainly going to be one of my launch games. But let's go back a little bit, because Nintendo's audience is...
Yep.
It's a different one, right? It's not necessarily the ones that you get on PlayStation or Xbox or Steam, which is where your games typically do best. It's sort of the home for Witcher and Cyberpunk. So what attracted you to Switch 2? Why were you keen to get on board so early?
Well, I would dare to say that Nintendo audience is growing, and it's broadening, and I think it's quite a bit different from what it used to be even a few years ago. And I think Nintendo is also realizing that. I mean, we have seen a big number of titles being announced on the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, which you would maybe not initially immediately think of when it comes to shipping on a platform like Switch. With that said, we have also had a very cool experience with The Witcher 3 or The Switcher on Nintendo Switch, the original one. And there's absolutely, we do feel and we actually do know that there's an appetite for big open world AAA, RPGs, which you would normally expect to be released on PC and consoles. And it very much fulfills, even to me personally, it really fulfills the fantasy of playing such a game on the go. You are not tied to big PC rig, but I can actually take it on the go without any major compromises to the game itself. I personally can't wait to play Cyberpunk and many other games which I already managed to play a little bit on the Paris event.
Okay, I'm jumping a little bit ahead of than I was planning. Let's talk about The Witcher 3, because here's a question. Did you find the audience on Switch, the first Switch, was it a completely new audience? So you're reaching players you weren't reaching before, you hadn't even touched a Witcher game before?
Yeah.
Or did you find it was actually existing Witcher players who just liked the idea of having a version of the game that they could just play on the go?
Yeah, of course, we were, I remember, those conversations back in a few years back, that's, we were actually wondering is, if there will be like an audience for this kind of game on the platform, which is Nintendo Switch back then, and there's which we then consider like a typical Nintendo audience. Luckily, like the idea of playing the game on the go like that, and then I remember that even holding it for the first time, like both of which are in Cyberpunk. It really made us, I think, realize that there absolutely should be an audience like this. Even back then, you could, I think, see that the Nintendo audience is growing as a whole. And there are more, mature gamers also, entering the Nintendo ecosystem. And it's proven to be successful. I mean, there's The Witcher 3 back in the day was one of the first, I think, games of this kind to be released on Switch 1. And it's, for us at least, it's like sort of a precedent that there's absolutely an appetite in the world for games like this on the platform. And this Switch is so much more, than just about first party titles. So,
but did you find that actually this is the reason why I asked this question is I interviewed the Civilization team last year.
Sure.
And I talked about Civilization 7, and they said Civilization 6, their previous game, they found that a lot of people that were playing it on Switch were people that already had the game on PC.
Yeah.
They had this scenario where they said, oh, people just want to play this game on the go.
That's right.
And so I was wondering if you had that same phenomena with Witcher.
Yes, I do believe. I mean, absolutely yes. Especially that with cross progression. I mean, you can pretty much pick the game where you left off on a PC and console. But there is absolutely, we did find a new audience of people who we may not necessarily reach if it wasn't for the Switch.
Okay.
So people who are looking forward to play the games on the go. Those are absolutely a new audience for the Witcher as well.
And I guess, I don't know, this is all hypothetical right now, but obviously because there's Steam Deck, right? So I guess if you are somebody that had the game on PC and you want to play it on the go, you've already got an option there.
That's right.
Do you think that might change what you've got with Cyberpunk?
I'd say that I'm not sure if I would consider Steam Deck like even almost a separate platform like Switch 2, right? Switch 2 is an entirely platform on its own. Which is not an extension to anything else. And then Steam Deck, as much as I love the device, but it feels sometimes like an extension to existing PC audience and like PC enthusiasts. While Switch 2 has its own audience, it's very big, it's super successful. I mean, the Switch one has sold in many millions of copies worldwide, and I think this allows developers like us to tap into that audience and then to pretty much reach entirely new player base. So
the appeal is definitely reaching new audiences.
Absolutely.
Rather than just satisfying giving your existing audience. I know that's part of the benefit, but it's maybe not the focus.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Switch 2 a little bit. What excites you most about what it's capable of doing?
I would generally say that I would maybe start with the performance. I mean, it really felt like a really big performance leap when it compared to Switch 1. And then what this will allow to many developers out there is to bring their games to the platform and maybe also consider their usually AAA of games to be released day one on Switch 2 as well. And I think that we're going to see more and more third-party titles to be released on the platform, which we may not necessarily expect on Switch 1 even back in the day. The previous generation has proven to be so successful, and then there is so many more players to be reached with that I think that performance will surely allow it. And I think performance is the Cyberpunk 2077 is a nice example of that. That you can ship the game, which is considered to be super demanding on PC and consoles, which plays very well on the go and using that hardware. On a personal level, I really like all the platform specific features. The mouse control, for example, is something I was quite blown away with. It is a smaller device and it's a smaller mouse, but it really struck me how accurate it is, and I can actually use it on any surface. I've played a bunch of games using that piece of hardware, and that was super cool. So I think we, even with Cyberpunk 2077, we decided that we want to take advantage of as many platform specific features as possible. So.
You don't have any Mario hats though, do you? Or
no. But I did try the Metroid game, which is plays extremely well. It's really something else.
What amazed me about the mouse aiming was the fact that I could switch between normal controls.
Yes,
it was seamless.
Yes, it was seamless. Very cool. So this was really something I wish more games will bring in the future to the platform.
I think there's definitely room for an accessory company to create like a cradle for it, because it did work very well, but it could do with being a little chunkier. So I think just a little bit of plastic to stick over the top would make the difference. I mean, I probably play it in handheld mode, so I probably won't experience it quite that often, but I was also quite impressed with that functionality.
Same here.
So has getting the game working effectively on Switch 2, how easy was that?
Well, it's never easy. I mean, of course, it is I don't want to say, we did like major compromise, God forbid, but First of all, we wanted to make sure that the game feels organic to the platform. And then, it's not just, simple one-to-one port from PC or console. We did have to put some optimization into it, of course, and then make sure that it also plays well on a smaller screen. But I dare to say it, it was not a gigantic effort whatsoever. Thanks to the increased performance, we actually managed to play the game fairly soon after we decided to give it a go. And then, the rest was like history. And then we spent a fair amount of time on making sure that it plays very well, developing, platform-specific features again, which hopefully will arise with a very good experience for the players they want.
I was sort of expecting it to be more like maybe a port of the PS4 or the Xbox One version, but the fact that the expansion's in there, because that was never on the old machine. So
that's right.
It was clearly a much bigger job than I'd necessarily assumed it would be before going to play the thing.
The part of the game in Phantom Liberty already, because I think that was a part of the launching experience as well, that you can already say that it's playing nicely. So yeah, but putting everything in one package and providing as much value as possible, 300 plus hours hopefully experience for many players was the goal from the get-go.
When Cyberpunk first launched, I think it's fair to say that CD Projekt took a reputational hit at the time because it didn't work as great on consoles. You've since iterated, you've updated the game countless times. It works very well today on all platforms. You've turned the situation around. I argue that you reputationally sort of back on a much stronger footing. So were you wary of the potential risk you were taking of trying to get Cyberpunk running on less powerful hardware again?
Well, I'd say that we are absolutely looking at it. We wanted to make sure that it plays right. I mean, if it were, I think it would be apparent from very early on that it's, for example, is not capable of running the game of this scale. But then, of course, there is also a matter of doing some compromises here and there. But we would never at this point we would never make a compromise which would hurt the artistic vision behind the game. It just has to feel right. So that's why we've upon some fine tuning on the dev side and making sure that it runs well. I think there is always a thinking in the back of their head that if people are going to really compare it to and expect the PC level of performance. But I think it's also, again, with our Witcher 3 experience, players in general are, I don't want to say quite forgiving, but understanding of platforms' performance limitations. And they tend to not maybe expect PC rigged path tracing kind of experience, which they are used to on the most capable platforms out there. It is a big AAA RPG on the go. We want to make sure that we can play it from start to finish, without making any major compromises. And I think we've managed to do just that. So, but of course, the players will judge in the end.
It seems like you learned a lot though from that Witcher 3 experience in terms of what works and what players are willing to accept, and also what they like about it. Was there any particular lesson from The Witcher 3 that's influenced Cyberpunk?
I'd say there were quite a few. So I've already touched on the audience and how we feel the appetite for such games is out there. There were quite a few things which we already took into consideration. The cartridge being one of them. So very early on, we wanted to make sure that the game fits on the cartridge. So that there is no additional downloads required. It's just a more or less plug and play experience, unless you have to download some additional language packs from the Nintendo eShop. But otherwise, we wanted to make sure that it actually feels again like a plug and play experience. Otherwise, of course, as like I mentioned before, it's never just a one-to-one port from PS5, PS4, or anything else. You have to make some additional effort to make sure that the game feels and plays well on the console this size. And I don't just mean mouse aiming or gyroscope aiming, but also, for example, making the text a little bigger so that it feels right on the smaller screen and whatnot. So yeah, just make sure that it feels right on the platforms. There were quite a lot of learnings from what we did on the Witcher 3. We've applied them here as well.
Oh wow, yeah, you're becoming handheld experts.
I don't think we are there yet, but I think we are learning on the go. I'd say again, it's a first for us to launch a game together with a console, but I think we're getting there.
I guess Nintendo's put its arms around you. They've taken you on tour and stuff. But have you had a lot of you must have had a lot of interaction and engagement with Nintendo on this one?
They are awesome partners. I mean, we admittedly were working with them very early on the console, and how if we can bring Cyberpunk to the platform. Of course, I cannot give you specifics, but they were super supportive from the start. They were quite amazed with even early builds of the game. Like you said, we are just a month away from the console's launch, and they've been super supportive. We have been present on every event, and we are super lucky to have them as partners.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned it yourself, but one of the big conversations around Switch 2, at least on social media, at the moment, I mean, there's lots of conversations, and you shouldn't always listen to all of them, but particularly when it comes to third-party developers, is using of these key cards rather than putting the whole game on a cartridge. You are one of the exceptions, one of the few exceptions actually, who's managed to squeeze the game onto a physical cart. You mentioned that it was important. You learned that you needed to do that. Why was that important?
Well, we try to look at those things as players ourselves sometimes. Especially, I think that was a big learning from original Switch, when of course the memory was way lower than I think than it is right now with Switch 2. But then again, the game like Witcher 3 would, I think, take up to 80% of your internal memory if you don't have an external memory card. In this case, I think the additional download is like a maybe unnecessary step which you would need to take. Of course it's possible, but for many it's an additional hassle. And just a plug and play experience I think is a really cool thing we wanted to do. We've already seen from the original Switch and the Witcher 3 that players and Nintendo is quite receptive to that. And then it's actually resonated with them very well. So it was, again, a goal which we wanted to achieve fairly early on.
I think on Switch, when it comes to at launch anyway, when a game launches, up to 80% of a game's sales could be the physical version of the game. And I think, and unlike, which is the opposite on Xbox and not quite the opposite on PlayStation.
Yes.
But a lot more significantly different.
Absolutely.
But obviously those cartridges aren't cheap, and they've got so many third-party developers that are not doing it.
Yeah.
You're not thinking maybe you could have got away with it and done a download only?
It's not a matter of getting away with something. It's what felt right. You mentioned it, but Nintendo in physical and its retail is still quite strong, and I think retail is in general not going anywhere. I don't think we'll soon experience a reality where we're just having all games digital and then no retail space. We are known to deliver quite rich physical editions of our games. We likely will include like an extra physical goodie or two with a physical edition of Cyberpunk. But again, I think it's especially important for Nintendo audience because there are so many games also available again with retail edition. Yes, we could have gone away with it, but is there a point? The right thing to do was to have it out on the cartridge with a plug and play experience.
It certainly seems to have been a bit of this makes it sound very corporate, but a bit of a PR win anyway. Fans seem to be certainly very grateful that you've done that. And so looks like the right choice.
I think so.
I don't have too many other questions, but CD Projekt is known for pushing the technical barriers for its games, right? Its games are often always on the cutting edge, sometimes to its detriment, but it's always sort of cutting edge visuals, incredible performance. But younger audiences today, they're into Roblox. They seem a little bit less bothered by that.
Yeah.
And then you've got things like Switch 2, which obviously isn't PlayStation 5. It isn't top end PCs. You've got lower end PCs. Obviously, you've got the Xbox Series S. But considering all that, this is more of a general, broader question.
Sure.
Has that influenced a little bit how CD Projekt thinks about games going forward? We need to be mindful of the fact that there is this now spectrum of players from.
Absolutely. Our biggest titles are, of course, rated them for mature. So we are targeting, like we'll say, the more, mature audiences anyway. But we're absolutely mindful that, players who will play our future titles are, entering the gaming space right now, and they have to be sort of introduced maybe to the IPs as early as possible. But with that said, the growth is massive. And then, of course, we do think that I'd say that, you have to make sure that, for example, in Nintendo's case, maybe it's not about just providing the open world experience, but also it's pushing the hardware to the limit to make sure that it does not feel like a compromised version of anything. And then people who are used to play on Nintendo, like their first party titles, and then maybe all of a sudden they will discover Cyberpunk or The Witcher, right? Because they usually would not get to do that because they don't own a PC or like a bigger console. So to answer your question, I think that it is absolutely important. And even though our games are rated, or like meant for mature audiences, we have to be absolutely mindful that, those players in just a few years from now will become major players. And then we have to push ourselves also to introduce the IP to them as early as possible. And then we don't do that with just games. We try to make additional efforts on the whole franchise and the flywheel. And then how we did that, for example, with Cyberpunk Edge Runners. We are doing a lot on the board game side, like, comic books, whatnot, just to make sure that there's been many mediums where we can touch on those broader audiences, which are maybe not even necessarily gamers, right? I mean, those people will be introduced to the IPs, and then the video games should be at the center of it. But we are not just competing with other games at this point,
No.
It's about entertainment and your time and how those players and those people, like younger audiences, are spending their free time. So we have to make sure to be there.
With the conversation about the battle for time, I often say like your competition isn't just, you're launching on June 5th with a load of big Nintendo games, but what's coming out of the cinema and what's on Netflix that week.
Yeah.
And you're competing on all fronts. And you talked about, here's the thing for me, I've got The Witcher 3 on Xbox, but I'm a dad of 2 young children and I don't get too much time to play these things on the screen. The Cyberpunk is a great example. It's a game I've probably only done about 5 hours of. The fact that it's now on, I don't have a Steam Deck.
Sure.
But the fact that it's now on Switch 2 means great. I loved what I played of those 5 hours. And I now will have a chance because it's flexible. It fits into my life.
Right.
I don't need TV time to play it.
Yes.
It's a wonderful sort of opportunity for me to play these things. And I am a hardcore gamer, right?
Same story here. I travel quite a lot. And then I purposely waited for the Switch 2 to come out to catch up with my Switch 1 backlog, because I spend quite a lot of time on the plane. And then this is my playing on the go fantasy. And I know there will be titles which I did not, for example, have time to experience on the TV or like a PC, which I will be able to now play on a plane, for example. So that's very cool. So
Elden Ring, for all the games that they've announced, I played a chunk of them, but not finished them, or certainly not played them as much as I'd like. So it's very exciting to me.
Right.
So, but is it? And this is where I'm expecting your PR person to pull you off the screen. So is it possible we might see CD Projekt again on Switch 2 in the future?
Well, there's nothing to announce or speak to, because even if we had something planned, I cannot tell you right now. But what I can tell you is that we will surely be looking at the platform. I'm expecting it to share at least the similar level of success as Switch 1. Maybe at some point we'll be there with in the future. Again, it's impossible to ignore what I can tell you. And then, of course, we have a big AAA, games on the way, but there is nothing set in stone yet. And the biggest focus right now is to, develop them and make them available to the players. But of course, the Switch 2 will surely remain at the center of our focus as well. So,
well, I will put fingers crossed for Witcher 4 on Switch then.
Yeah.
But I thought I'd at least try and ask. I think that's all I've got in terms of questions. Thank you, Jan, for being part of the show today, and really good luck with the launch.
Thank you. It's really, really a pleasure to be here, and appreciate it.
Thank you. That's all we have time for today. For those watching or listening to the show, you can see all of our Switch 2 coverage and indeed all of our featured topics and interviews on thegamebusiness.com. If you go there and put in your email address, you'll make sure you'll never miss an episode, never miss a newsletter or feature or story. And most importantly, it's all free. So please do that. Until next time, thank you for tuning in. Favorite Nintendo game?
Super Mario 64.
You can't argue with that.
Yeah.
What is the Switch 2 feature that excites you the most?
Mouse aiming.
Do you mostly play Switch in handheld mode, dock mode, or tabletop mode?
Handheld.
I don't think anyone's going to say tabletop. Excluding Cyberpunk and excluding Nintendo first-party games, which Switch 2 title are you most interested in playing?
Is Elden Ring.
Will Switch 2 outsell Switch 1?
I hope so.
What is your Mario Kart character of choice?
Oh, Wario, or Wario as we call it.
If you could give one piece of advice to a developer or publisher looking to work on Switch 2, what would it be?
Do not underestimate the physical edition. Nintendo players are very receptive or appreciative of physical editions done right.
Brilliant.
Poetic. Couldn't have said it better.